All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Mighty Blaze monthly book rec party. We are thrilled to have you all here. I'm here with Ellen and Karen, and we are bringing you some of our super exciting new releases or things that have released recently or that are upcoming. We've got all kinds of great stuff for you tonight. So, for anyone who's new to joining us, welcome. We're glad to have you here. Please do go to amightyblaze.com and look at our calendar to see all of the events that we have going all week long. We have interviews almost every day of the week. We have thrillers, we have Thoughtful Bro, we have Lit Fic, we have debuts. Ellen is our debut host. We have mysteries, Frontliner Fridays, and all kinds of other special interviews going on. We also have a podcast which takes our past interviews and puts them into podcast format. You can find all of our interviews on our YouTube channel where they live forever. And our other ones do air on Facebook. And somebody correct me, is that the only place? Facebook and YouTube. That's where we air our interviews. So we're going to be talking about some great books tonight. I am thrilled to start things off with some books that are releasing in April that I'm very excited about. Once I've talked about all of them, I will put all the titles and authors into the chat so you can screenshot that or jot them down as I go along. I am starting with Rabbit Moon by Jennifer Hay. And Jennifer, I'll follow her to the ends of the earth and I will read anything she writes. She is an absolutely prolific, magical author. Her book Mercy Street was an amazing audiobook, which I listened to on Libro.fm. If any of you are watching and you're still listening to audiobooks on the big A, I am going to ask you, I'm going to plead with you to stop giving that man money. He doesn't need it. And instead switch to Libro.fm. If you switch, I believe this whole month, and you put the code SWITCH into, once you sign up for their monthly membership, use the code SWITCH, and you will get 3 audiobooks for the price of 1. With Libro.fm, your credits never expire. You can listen across devices. You get book recs from booksellers like me, not an algorithm. Libro is a social purpose company putting social causes above profits, and you can support A Mighty Blaze by designating us as your independent bookstore that you'd like to support. So many reasons to go to Libro.fm and get your audiobooks there. So Mercy Street was an incredible audiobook. Now we have Rabbit Moon, which is a book that just absolutely haunts me. I read this ages ago, and it has haunted me ever since. 4 years after their bitter divorce, Claire and Aaron get a phone call no parent is prepared for. Their 22-year-old daughter, Lindsay, teaching English in China during a gap year, has been critically injured in a hit and run. At a Shanghai hospital, they wait at her bedside, hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. The accident unearths a deeper fissure in the family, the shocking event that ended the Litvaks' marriage and turned Lindsay against them. There's so many layers to the story, and Jennifer just does a beautiful job of putting the reader into the mind of each one of her characters. There is such a sense of place. She just transports you to her setting, and all of the characters really, the way they play off each other and work together is incredible. So Rabbit Moon by Jennifer Hay, and she's going to be a guest on A Mighty Blaze. Karen, can you share a little more about that?
Yeah, on the 11th at 4 o'clock Eastern, Jennifer Hay will be interviewed by Jenna Bloom. And Jenna always does an amazing job. She's such a great interviewer, and this book sounds amazing. So be sure to tune in on the 11th at 4.
Absolutely. And if you can't tune in at 4, remember you can check back to our YouTube channel and watch that at any point. So my next title is a debut, and it is unbelievable. This is a debut. I found this novel when I was kind of in a rut. I feel like I had read 3 or 4 books in a row that just seemed to follow the novel formula. You know, it's just like almost an Mad Libs, where they were placing, here we're going to put a character here, and here's going to be the conflict. And then I found the 7 O'Clock Club. This is by Amelia Ireland. 4 strangers are brought together to participate in an experimental treatment designed to heal broken hearts in this surprising and heartfelt debut. In a perfectly ordinary building, 4 strangers who couldn't be more different meet for the first time. Their skepticism of this new kind of grief therapy and of the unnervingly perceptive group leader means they're all wary. But as the weeks go by, they find themselves returning again and again, pulled to work toward healing, even if it means first facing the pain head on. The characters were so distinctly memorable. The fact that they were so different, and yet she brings them together in these surprising ways. And then right toward the end, there is a twist that just had me absolutely gasping. I did not see it coming at all. Mary Seifert, you're giving us exclamation points. I hope that means that you are intrigued with this book, or maybe you've already read it. It was one of those where I was like, yes, this is what I want in a novel. It would make a great book club discussion group. I loved it. The 7 O'Clock Club by Amelia Ireland. And my next title, for every mother who has ever tried to have it all, tried to make it all happen for everyone, and found themselves failing or questioning or feeling the imposter syndrome that so many of us have dealt with, we have The Guilt Pill by Smaya Dave. This is a brilliant novel. Absolutely incredible. Let me, here, I'm just going to read you a little part from this because it was so well done. The pages almost turned themselves. I could not put this down. Maya Patel has it all. Her own startup, a sexy doting husband, influencer status, and now a new baby. Or does she? Because behind closed doors, Maya's drowning. Her newborn's taking a toll on her marriage. Her best friend won't return her calls, and her company's hanging on by a thread. The worst part? It's all her fault. If she could just be a better boss, mother, wife, daughter, friend, maybe she wouldn't feel so guilty all the time. Enter #girlboss Liz Anderson, who introduces Maya to the Guilt Pill, an experimental supplement that erases all female guilt, basically turning the person into a man. As Maya becomes more and more addicted to these pills, and it takes more to get rid of that guilt, her life starts to fall apart. Smaya just absolutely nails what it feels like to be a mother trying to keep all of these plates in the air. The Guilt Pill, give it to every new mother you know. Give it to your mom for Mother's Day. Put it on your book club calendar because, there's so much to talk about. It is amazing. Next title, we are going into a little historical fiction with one of my favorite local to Chicago authors, Rita Woods. I've loved all of Rita's books, but this may be her best yet. The Edge of Yesterday. Now, some of you of a certain age might remember the movie from way back when, Time After Time, with Christopher Reeve and oh gosh, her name will come to me.
Catherine Ross?
No. She was Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman.
Jane Seymour.
Yes, thank you, Karen.
They're similar looking.
Yes, so that movie developed a huge cult following. I mean, people just it's got its own cult following. So The Edge of Yesterday brought back a lot of those same feelings, but with an educational, not in your face educational, just a real look at 1925 Detroit. So this goes back and forth between 1925 and 2025. You have a woman who has this beautiful marriage. She and her husband have been really close, and she is a dancer with one of New York's top companies. When a neurological issue causes her to have to stop dancing, they move back to Detroit, and she becomes very isolated. Her marriage starts to struggle. And one night as she's out for a walk, she kind of falls into a wormhole or a vortex and drops back into 1925, where she meets this charming and handsome doctor. So Rita does a beautiful job with her storytelling. I just loved this book so much. It's easily Rita's best work yet, and another one that would make a great book club title. So The Edge of Yesterday. I've got 2 more titles for you. I kept it to a short stack this month.
Well done.
This next book, I was going through a dark time. I picked this book up thinking it was going to be a light and snarky novel. It started out that way and then turned into so much more. It surprised me on every level. It is I See You've Called in Dead by John Kenney. So John Kenney a few years ago wrote love poems for married people, and they were these hilarious poems that dealt with, long-term relationships. And so I knew his name from those. This book just surprised me on 100 different levels, and all of them, it gave me things I didn't know I needed at the time. So this is the story of an obituary writer who accidentally publishes his own obituary one mildly drunken night, even though he's clearly not dead. Why would someone do this? Well, he's not really living his best life. He's fallen into a funk after a divorce. She left him for another man who is far more interesting. He's not doing his job well. So claimed an elderly woman, he claimed an elderly woman who died of natural causes actually died in a hang gliding accident, and that she was a man. So he's making, terrible mistakes with his obituary writing, and he's given up on dating. He's about to be fired, but the company can't fire him until they make him undead, because once he published his obituary through the company's systems automatically marked him as deceased, and so they can't fire him until they, for record's sake, bring him back to life. So while he's waiting for that, he meets somebody who talks him into going to wakes and funerals of total strangers. And the characters in this book are so memorable. I literally, all of the feels. I laughed, I sobbed. At the end of it, I felt wrung out in all of the right ways. And it's another book that did not follow any formula and was so unique and charming and funny and heartfelt. It's got literally everything I want in a novel. I See You've Called in Dead by John Kenney. And my last title, I think, is a Read with Jenna book. It is Heartwood by Amity Gage. And this is a thriller. Again, it's a book that doesn't follow your typical thriller formula. It takes place in the heart of the Maine woods. So a woman has been hiking part of the Appalachian Trail, which I actually way back when hiked part of, but I did not hike in Maine. And apparently I have visited the Maine coast, but as you get into the interior at the end of the Appalachian Trail, literally if you take like 4 or 5 steps off the trail, you can turn around and have no idea where you are. The woods are that dense. So we have a 42-year-old woman who has vanished 200 miles from her final destination. Alone in the wilderness, she pours her thoughts into fractured poetic letters to her mother as she battles the elements and struggles to keep her hope alive. At the center of the investigation into her disappearance is Beverly, the determined Maine State game warden leading the search on the ground. Meanwhile, you have Lena, a 76-year-old bird watcher in a Connecticut retirement community who becomes an unexpected armchair detective. As the story went along, I just could not figure out how they were going to tie this woman in this retirement community into the disappearance of this woman in Maine. It's brilliant. It is so, so well done. The cover is beautiful. Heartwood by Amity Gage. If you love a well-nuanced, multi-layered, suspenseful thriller, then Heartwood will fill the bill. And those are all of my titles. I will put them all into the chat for you. Can't wait to hear what Ellen and Karen have going on.
Thanks, Mary. All those books sound amazing. So I have 3 books, and my first one is by Fredrik Backman. This is my copy, but this is not the cover, but it's called My Friends. And Fredrik Backman is the author of Anxious People, which is a book that I just loved. And he's a New York Times bestselling author. This book is about 17-year-old Louisa. She is an orphan, and she recently lost her best friend. But years ago, when she was in a foster home, she made a connection to a painting on a postcard, and she's been carrying that postcard with her forever. And so she just happens to meet the artist of the painting on that postcard, and the painting reflects 3 friends on a pier. And so through this artist, she learns about friendship, she learns about survival, and she learns about finding her place. And because she learns about his friends and his childhood, and she finds a home with his friends. And it's just very heartwarming and very, very well written. Fredrik Backman is an excellent author. I would highly recommend it.
I just have to jump in because I'm obsessed with Fredrik Backman, and especially this book. It is my favorite book of his ever.
That's saying a lot.
Yeah.
That's a great writer.
He is such a great writer, and the way he writes friendships and the different characters so that you feel like you're each one of them. Teenagers, yes. And these friendships that, oh my gosh, I connected with this book on so many levels. And yeah, everyone needs to buy this book.
Definitely, yes. Just 1 second, please.
I'll just keep raving about it for a minute. I think I connected with it so much was because I had a troubled childhood, and I had those friends, like those friends where we were all kind of troubled, and we got into a little trouble, nothing huge or awful, but we banded together, and we, a little merry band of misfits. And so I really related to those childhood friends. I just thought he transports the reader into the pages, and the way he wrote this young woman was incredible as well.
Great. Thank you, Mary. So my next book is Miss Morgan's Book Brigade, and this just came out in paperback. This is Janet Skeslien Charles, and she is the author of The Paris Library, which I loved. This is about the true story of Jessie Carson. She's an American librarian who changed the literary landscape of France. It's a moving tale of sacrifice, heroism, and inspired storytelling immersed in the power of books to change our lives. And I just love that sentence, storytelling immersed in the power of books to change our lives, because I really do believe that books can change your life in stories. And so this takes place in 1918 and 1987. And Janet is great at doing the two storylines. She's excellent in that. And it's just a really great book that I really enjoyed. And my last book is another pre-order. This is Natalie Jenner. She's another favorite writer of mine. It's called Austen at Sea. And I'll let Mary jump in a second, but this is about two pairs of siblings, devotees of Jane Austen. They find their lives transformed by a visit to England and Sir Francis Austen, her last surviving brother and keeper of a long suppressed secret legacy. So it's a voyage and trip that will dramatically change each of their lives in ways that are unforeseen. And Natalie just has a way of putting things in writing, and she's just a beautiful writer. So I highly recommend it. Again, it's a pre-order. It comes out in May. So Mary, if you have any further comments, please.
Karen and I are just such Natalie Jenner fans. We are such big fans of hers. And the Jane Austen Society. Natalie, she's written several books, and they all have either a character that came from that first book, or she gives you these little Easter eggs. This book, I just found myself smiling throughout the whole thing. These two, the pair of sisters and the pair of brothers that are on this boat together, traveling to meet Jane Austen's brother and keeper of the archives. It's just, in today's world, we need books that are going to lift our hearts. And Natalie, she writes those books. So yeah, just a beautiful, beautiful story.
Okay. Thanks, Mary. And now here's Ellen.
Hello. So I'm going to jump in on Getting Lost in the Woods. I have finally, because I've been busy doing other things, read The God of the Woods, which is still number 10 on the New York Times bestseller list. It was Jimmy Kimmel's summer book read last summer. It was one of Barack Obama's favorite books of the year. Somebody in my book club said we should read it as book club. And I'll tell you, when I first started, I was like, well, what are we ever going to discuss in this book? It's, two children, 14 years apart from the same family, both get lost in the woods from their family's very wealthy home, which is adjacent to the camp that their family owns, where very wealthy children go for their summer and lead these entitled lives. I'm like, there's nothing to discuss. This book has a lot to discuss. It's about small towns and what happens to small towns when the wealthy discover them. What happens with class? What happens with family secrets? What happens with drug and alcohol dependency? It's a great story. The chapters are told by many, many, many different characters, and it alternates and you're jumping around. It also has 3 different time periods. And I've read a number of interviews with Liz Moore, the author, who said she kind of didn't keep track of it all. She just sort of plowed right in. And she goes, at some point, she's going to learn how to use a spreadsheet and really track these things down. But she does a really good job. And I definitely suggest that this is a book you read and not listen to. Much as I love audiobooks, I think it would be immensely difficult to follow it that way. What's helpful in the print book is that for every chapter, not only does it remind you who is narrating that chapter, but it also tells you where on the timeline you are. And it jumps back and forth. And there are times you have to go back and say, wait, who is that guy? How is he connected? There are tremendous red herrings. It's a mystery. And what's amazing is the number of chapters that end with you saying, oh, I just have to read one more chapter. I have to find out what happens. Because Liz is great at these little cliffhangers that you just want to read. And I will tell you, I was up many, many nights past my bedtime, which is already late, at trying to get ahead and figure out what was happening. And I will be surprised no one in saying I didn't figure it out. So my next book, I don't have a hard copy, maybe you can see it, is Emma, I don't know how to pronounce it. Do you know, Mary? Pate, Tilt.
Yes, and I met her, and I still, it's one of those names that I pronounce it one way in my head, and it comes out different when I talk.
We'll say Patty.
There you go.
We'll call her Emma Patty. I hope that's right. If not, you can find it in the bookstores, and maybe I probably should have listened to some interview where she's said her name out loud. Anyway, Tilt came out in March. It starts with a scene that is very familiar to all of us, shopping in IKEA, being overwhelmed by the names of all of the products, getting lost in the aisles. And here's a woman who is 9 months pregnant by herself in Portland, and she's trying to find the right crib, and she's reaching up, and all of a sudden the whole store starts to shake, and there is a very large and unexpected earthquake in IKEA. And this story is told with a first-person narrator, so you are hearing all of this woman's fears as she is first buried by boxes. It's dark, there's no light. People are pushing and shoving and trying to get their way out of the store. And when they ultimately do, they're far away from anything. And a whole parade of people starts walking in sort of a pilgrimage away from this IKEA store that's in wreckage. And it's just a really great perspective. It's a very different voice. And of course, you're pulled along because you want to know whether Annie gets to where she is, whether she and her husband, who were fighting before the IKEA trip, resolve things, whether the baby is safe. So it's a really good read. It's very fast. It'll raise your heartbeat a little bit, but you'll want to keep moving. So I see that Robin Stull is with us again. She was with us this afternoon, so welcome back. She heard a wonderful conversation with Camilla Barnes, The Usual Desire to Kill. And this book struck me when I was looking at it, because I was like, wow, that's a title for a thriller, a serial killer maybe, some really deranged child out to do stuff. And then you look at the cover and there are llamas on it. And in fact, the llama on the back you can see is kind of smiling. And you're like, what is this? This is a great book. Camilla's a wonderful writer. She's a playwright, very successful playwright in Paris. She writes mostly in French, but she does adaptations of other works for the Paris stage. She's engrossed in the theater community. And she started listening to a lot of dialogue while being a tour manager on some plays. And she just started hearing this discussion between a daughter who is in her 50s, who has very quirky parents who have moved from the home in which she was raised out to this very isolated house where, among other things, they raise llamas, or they have 2 llamas as pets. And it's a story about this daughter going to see her parents and sort of having to shed her adult professional life, because once she walks into this house, she's treated like a child again. And her parents are quirky and they have their own little strange dialogue. And the father is deaf, but he doesn't listen sometimes because he just doesn't want to listen, or he doesn't want to put his hearing aids in. And it's really a wonderful story about siblings and generations and the secrets and the stories you believe about your parents that you're trying to figure out. And are they going to tell you the truth about them ever? Are they ever going to treat you like an adult? It's very funny. You will be laughing, but I think there's a universality to this book that when she's talking about, I like Mindy's comment, a man that doesn't listen. Yes, a man who doesn't listen. And he's really the only male character who's present in the book. Surprise, surprise. The other one she's managed to get rid of in various ways. And it's funny, and you think, oh, it's going to be a laugh riot kind of book, and you will be laughing. But there's just so many insights into family life that even if your parents aren't quite as quirky or your sister not quite as absent, trust me, you will identify with these families. And she's actually on tour in the US right now. Her book's is being published in Germany. It's been published in Italy. We're lucky because it's out here ahead of the UK print version. So look for this in your stores. The Usual Desire to Kill came out on Tuesday. And then forgive me for those of you who are fans of Debut Spotlight, I'm going to talk about two books that we did earlier in this year, but we haven't featured yet on Recommendation Show. Red Clay by Charles B. Fancher came out in February, and we wanted to highlight him during Black History Month. Red Clay is a story that primarily takes place at the very end of the Civil War, but then has flashbacks and setbacks historically to slave life on one particular plantation in Alabama. And we hear the story of a young boy who grows up, as his father was like the house slave. His mother was in the kitchen cooking. And this young boy had sort of a preferred status as an 8-year-old and ultimately gets sent out to the fields, whereas this child with preferred status suffers many indignities of slavery. I think this book is like the roots of our time in that it steps you back. It tells the story of these families, what their lives are like. If you've read James and you're sort of imbued in that, what was like life from the slave's perspective, you get a lot more in depth on a really one specific family, but you also get the other side. And as Charles spoke about so beautifully when I interviewed him, people are really complicated. And these plantation owners, at some points they did good things, and at some points they stepped out and were just evil and horrible. And the book begins at the funeral of a man, and in Alabama, very traditionally Black church service, and a very old white woman shows up and is in the church. And then she comes to the house and she meets this family who's like, who is this? And she said, you don't know me, but back in the day, my family owned your family. And it's just a gorgeous telling of the story from a more modern perspective, but looking back on this family and on these intersecting families, and how we always think at the end of the war, life changed dramatically for the slaves. And what Charles Fancher does is remind us that life changed for everybody. And this started out, he was going to write nonfiction. He's a former journalist and corporate communications expert. He was going to write some stories about his own family life, much of which started the research, much of which was, not written down, couldn't find records. And he went to his mother, who said, oh, you should write that, and said, Mom, I don't have what it takes to write it as a nonfiction, but I'm thinking there's a book there. And he got to write this, and just a gorgeous story rooted in his family life, but clearly a departure into the land of fiction. Really good book. And then the last book is called The English Problem by Bina Kamlani. And Bina was Saul Bellows' editor, among other things, for many years. And she's taught writing in, I think at NYU in New York. And she wrote a book. It was so beautiful that when I interviewed her in January, I said, I haven't finished your book because I didn't want to rush through it. And so I'm going to interview you without knowing the ending. Is that okay? Do I need to know anything? This is how far I've gotten. And then I got tied up with all sorts of things. And I finally said, okay, now I've got a period of time. And I picked up the book. It is gorgeous. This is a book about a young, what we will now call South Asian man whose family is connected to the government in India and knows Mahatma Gandhi. And this boy, as a young boy, meets Mahatma Gandhi in his father's house and feels a real connection and says, that's the kind of person I want to be. And Mahatma Gandhi sees him and says, it's a tough life. There will be sacrifices. Can you do this? And he's thinking like giving up ice cream. Like, what's it going to be? He gets sent as an 18-year-old to England to study the law so that he can understand British lawmakers and then come back to India at 1948 and work for Indian independence. And he goes to India. He deals with racism. He deals with English society. He deals with it's a story of a journey. Bina has also edited a big translation of Homer's Odyssey. And so there's a whole aspect of that, of this young boy on an Odyssey and returning home, which he does, but all of the adventures he has in England. And it is beautiful. It's evocative. You will learn history. And this is actually based on, I believe, a great uncle of hers who had gone over, and much of this is fictionalized, but much is based on his life. You meet real life characters who were interested in the Indian independence movement in England at the time. And you sort of see, including Virginia Woolf, who was involved. And you just see these people and what this young boy is trying to figure out, both who he is as a person, what it is to be a brown man in a white, sort of affluent English British society. It's gorgeous. You will learn a lot about history, but not in a way that feels overwhelming. And Bina was just a wonderful woman to interview. She's out doing some touring now. And I think this would be a really good book club read because it's historical fiction, but it's set far enough away that we don't really remember all of this. And I think it's, there's some contemporary aspects of it as we look at countries fighting for their independence. I think people will really enjoy this really pretty book. That's what I got.
Wow. What an amazing collection of books we've talked about tonight. I hope that everyone tuning in live and later will find at least one that intrigues them. And if so, that you'll purchase it from bookshop.org. A Mighty Blaze, we have a stall at Bookshop, and that purchases help us pay for StreamYard so that we can bring you these recommendation shows every month and bring you all of the wonderful interviews that we conduct every week. You can also go to amightyblaze.com and sign up for our wonderful newsletter put together by Karen. And that way you will always know exactly what is coming your way. But thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight and joining us later on. I hope you heard something there that intrigued you. And everyone have a great rest of your evening. Thanks for tuning in.
Happy April.